And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 163rd episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage of Indiana University sports to as many fans across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, where I am your host, Nithin Krishnan, and along here with me tonight is my usual partner, Matt Lukens. Matt, we're 10 days away, and we just got some interesting breaking news in the college football world. A minute before we started recording, it looks like Alabama's head coach, Nick Saban, and their athletic director, Greg Byrne, both tested positive for COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that, and how's life going in general?
I'm just shocked that people from the University of Alabama would test positive for COVID. And no, obviously, I hope they're healthy and that they don't have any complications from this. Seeing that Nick is on the elderly side of being a football head coach, and then of course their athletic director as well. That's a big hit for Alabama. I'm sure they'll probably play a game this weekend without him, which will be interesting to see Alabama coached by somebody that isn't Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Steve Sarkisian is watering at the mouth to maybe get a little bit more creative with his offensive play calling.
But yeah, it looks like Alabama did issue a release saying Sark does take over as the interim sort of, not even like the official interim tag, but just like he's now the temporary leader of activities while Saban recovers. Apparently, Saban ran practice from home virtually this afternoon or this morning. So clearly he was a little concerned that maybe something was.
Can you imagine going through like pad drills and having some like robot with Nick Saban's face on it yelling from his couch with a beer? That was wrong. Run it back. That's what I expect to be happening.
Or if you're a coach, right? You were saying how Nick Saban's up there in age. Some of these other elderly coaches just chewing out a guy on Zoom and then realizing he was on mute the whole time, and then he has to go back and do it again.
How does this darn thing work? I only know football.
I'm out of breath. I can't yell at you anymore. By the way, Alabama faces Georgia on Saturday night. Not that big of a deal.
Only one versus three.
So we'll see what happens there. As we're only 3 days from kickoff in that contest. But overall, Matt, as we transition over to the Indiana football side of things, only 10 days, as crazy as it sounds, until the longest offseason in Big Ten college sports history comes to an end. 10 days to go, October 24th. We got some news earlier this week that kickoff time for that Saturday game will be 3:30 Eastern. Usually it's like 3:35 or 3:37 Eastern time on Fox Sports 1. So that's where you can tune in. No fans are allowed at Memorial Stadium for that game or any other college football game this year, at least for now. I mean, we are seeing some NFL teams update their policies as the year goes on. Maybe that's in the works. Who knows? But as far as we know right now, no fans will be allowed in the stadium, so you can watch that opening matchup against the number 9 Penn State Nittany Lions, at least as of right now, on FS1. But last week we talked about the Hoosier offense, Matt. This week we're going to focus the attention over onto the IU defensive side of the ball. I know you've had a word or two for Kane Womack, the IU defensive coordinator. Indiana's numbers were all over the page last year as far as defense goes, but just from a high level, Matt, what are your opening thoughts on the Hoosiers on the defensive side of the ball as they head into an 8-game +1 completely exclusive Big Ten football schedule?
I mean, you look at this defense, it's still a young defense. Most of the players are sophomores and juniors. So it's promising though, because again, a lot of the guys that are coming back got a lot of playing time. Tywan Mullen is a sophomore, right? It's going to be probably the star of our defense, as maybe the best overall defensive player as a sophomore. You look at Cam Jones as a junior, as a linebacker as a junior. Micah McFadden, who I feel like has been in the program since like 2012, is only a junior. He's been around for 2 years. He had a good year last year. James Head, junior, defensive lineman. We have people like Reese Taylor, who's a junior, who I feel like Reese just got here. And he's the opposite of Micah McFadden. I feel like Micah McFadden has gotten like the what's the center from Kansas's name that was like there for Perry Ellis.
Perry Ellis, yeah.
So I feel like Micah McFadden to me has the Perry Ellis effect, where Reese Taylor has like the Yogi Ferrell effect, where I feel like Yogi's was only at IU for like 2 years, and it was like a senior year, and I was like, wait, what happened? But no, I mean, this is very young defense, and a lot of the players that are major contributors are juniors. So we're looking at a very promising defense this year, and then a top level defense going into next year. Just the consistency that we're going to be getting out of these players is going to be great.
Yeah, and on the offensive side, you've got a lot of returning players, but a new offensive coordinator. The defensive side, they're staying consistent. Kane Womack, Tom Allen, that battery will continue to lead the charge for the IU defense. Some of the numbers that stood out as far as IU from 2019, they rated mostly in the top half of college football throughout. They finished 45th in ESPN's S&P Plus ratings out of 130 FBS teams. They ranked 45th in points per game overall. They allowed 24.4 last season. A little bit better in the run defense, only 3.92 yards per carry allowed. It's always good when you're under 4. It's a little bit better if you're under 3.5, but that number was good for 50th in college football. The pass defense, they limited teams. They only allowed 213 pass yards per game, which is 46th in the country. But IU only had 7 picks all last season. Remember, IU played 13 games with that bowl game against Tennessee. Only had 7 interceptions, which was a number that I think Kane Womack would tell you is way too low. They only gave up a 55% completion percentage, though, which was a top 25 mark in college football. They had 27 sacks, which was 66th, and a +2 turnover margin, which was top 50 as well. So what we want to do for all of you tonight is go through some key players at each level of the defense. We're going to start with the defensive line, move to linebackers, and then the secondary. Matt, you mentioned him a minute ago. I'm going to start with defensive lineman James Head, the junior. He's number 6, I believe, as far as his jersey number goes. He's going to try to affect quarterbacks as early as Sean Clifford in week 1. His best skill is pass rushing. What are you expecting of him in 2020?
I expect him to improve on his sacks mark from last year. He ended the year with 2.5 sacks. That's not something to like celebrate about, like 2.5 sacks. You look at the rest of college football, it's a pretty average number, but as a sophomore, that's pretty good, especially in the Big Ten, going up against Big Ten offensive lines. I look for him to step up and improve that mark this year, maybe even doubling it. I'd like to see him around the 5 sack mark by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. He is somebody that lives in the backfield, but not getting to the quarterback exactly. He had a lot of pressures last year, a few knockdowns as well. Somebody who's going to be a disruptor, but I hope that he finishes some of his tackles and some of his pressures better than he did last year as a junior.
And that's the thing, Head is a Miami, Florida native, okay? And the athleticism jumps off the charts with him. You talk about a 6'5", 220-pound defensive end. The physical traits are there. He's a guy who was recruited by Matt Rule in Baylor before Rule went on to coach Carolina in the NFL. Michigan State wanted him when Mark D'Antonio was the head coach a couple years ago. So his physical ability is there. Now the question is can he elevate it to the next level? I threw out a poll question over on Indiana HQ earlier tonight.
We love our polls.
I think our listeners love these polls too, because we sent out a question, and I want to get your response to this before I give you the results. Okay, if you ran IU's defense this season, Matt, which skill would you emphasize to help get as many wins as possible? All right. It's clean tackling, tight coverage, great pass rush, or forced turnovers. Which one are you picking?
I like our offense a lot. I want our offense to have the ball. So forced turnovers.
Oh, I like how you're thinking. Interestingly enough, the forced turnovers is second right now, getting 28%. Our followers love some clean tackling. In fact, our friend at Big Red Machine 44 says individual clean tackling, especially against play action, can make a big difference. So, clean tackling, turnovers, dangerous pass rush came third. And all I'm saying is, Matt, you predicted 5 for James Head. That might be a little bit tough in an 8-game schedule, but if you've got Sean Clifford in week 1, if you've got, Justin Fields coming up on your schedule, if you've got a lot of quality QBs, Wisconsin and Purdue is going to have a tough offense as well. Never mind Michigan State. Also, you can pretty much put anyone on Indiana's schedule in this list. Rushing the passer is going to be key. The team leader last year was Jerome Johnson with 5, and that's in a 13-game slate. So hopefully James Head can come in and make a really big impact in the sacks category, because if he can, he's going to start hearing his name thrown around for NFL draft consideration.
I'm not going to lie. When I'm doing these predictions, I always forget that it's 8 games and not 12. I always forget. That's like 5 sacks, like you double it. He's getting more playing time. Like, wait a minute, it's 8 games, and I've already said it. Comes back and kicks me in the butt.
Well, and really it's 9 games, but it's just we don't know who the 9th opponent is. But Indiana's going to play 9 games this season, assuming everyone stays healthy and wise. So the next guy we want to mention on this defensive line is Jerome Johnson. We said he led the team last year with 5 sacks. Some of the real film-intensive NFL scouts are already talking about Jerome Johnson. He lines up in the interior of the defensive line. They're saying that Johnson, who's a redshirt senior, can make a big impact at the next level, which is not something you hear from IU football. When you hear IU football in the NFL, you hear wide receivers, you hear offensive line. You got Nate Sudfeld as a quarterback. The running backs usually make. You don't hear much about defensive line pressure, Matt. How big is Jerome Johnson to this team when the season begins?
I mean, Tywone Mullen is going to get the headlines because he's the most talented player on the defense and probably be one of the highest defensive picks from IU in the NFL draft, which is how you get your name out there as a developing defensive talent. Jerome Johnson needs to be in the same category as Tywone Mullen, because of where he plays and the level he plays at. He is in the interior of the offensive line. When you look at the players that are drafted into the NFL and play, the interior defensive line is almost all 5-star, high 4-star recruits who go to Alabama, LSU, like you name it. Like they're the high-level top recruits, and you're looking up and down defensive lines. The fact that Jerome Johnson is getting looked at and saying he can make a difference at the next level is a huge deal. But he plays the interior defensive line, and if you don't know enough about football, that's the ugly part of football. That's the mean, gritty part of football. And Jerome plays it mean and gritty. And look, 5 sacks last year was great, led the team. I hope that he makes that mark this year. Another 5 sacks, I'm going to predict, this year in a shortened schedule.
There you go.
There we go. I hope he equals it. And I think he can. Look, he's got really good burst. He can get to the quarterback. He's shown that. And from an interior defensive line perspective, that is a talent, because these guys are supposed to be the rocks in the middle of the defense. They're supposed to stop the offensive line from getting any push, any sort of shape. And that's your job, is just to push the offensive line back. And the fact that he can do that and then get to the quarterback at the same time, that is a talent. And Jerome Johnson is a talent.
Yeah, he's number 98 on the roster. Johnson, 6'3", 304 pounds, according to the Indiana University roster. So he can more than certainly carry his weight on the inside of the defensive line. He's the active career sack leader for Indiana with 9.5 as far as players who are currently on the roster. He has 16.5 tackles for loss. So even if he doesn't sack the quarterback, he can penetrate the backfield and take down running backs or wide receivers who are trying to carry the football. So Jerome Johnson's going to be huge, folks. If you don't know the name, get to know it, because if you see somebody in the face of any of these quarterbacks Indiana faces, it's probably going to be either James Head or Jerome Johnson. And we know how important defensive line play is for teams to succeed. in the Big Ten, especially Indiana. So that's the defensive line. Moving on to the linebackers, Perry Ellis. I mean, Micah McFadden, the junior, is back and ready to go. He led the team in tackles last year. Micah McFadden, some games he looks like Brian Urlacher. Other games he looks like Brian Urlacher's knockoff discount version.
Nathan Gary for the Eagles, by the way. That's a deep cut. No, Micah's good, but he was very inconsistent as a sophomore. Again, like you just alluded to, one game he looks great. The next game he looks like he should get on the next bus to Division II. And everybody's upset and crying. He did not have a great bowl game by any means. Some people I remember went after him a little bit too hard on Twitter after the game, saying a lot of his mistakes led to Tennessee winning. I would say that's not being ready for an onside kick down up a couple scores is probably what led to the game being lost. But that's just me. No, but look, he's going to be a junior this year. 60 tackles, 2 interceptions last year. He showed the ability to not only tackle in space, but also cover his man. And as a linebacker, that's a skill, especially in Tom Allen's defense, that you need. I expect him to reach the 60 tackle mark this year in an 8-game schedule.
Yeah.
He's going to be in the middle causing disruptions. I don't think he gets that 2 INT mark. Mm-hmm. I think that gets covered somewhere else.
Yeah,
I think somebody else might get a couple extra interceptions. So that's me alluding to something we might talk about here in a minute. But I like Micah McFadden a lot. I hope if there's any improvement that I want out of Micah McFadden is I want consistency.
Yeah,
that's all I want.
Right, and
that's had a pretty good season.
And that's perfectly understandable for somebody going into his junior season. And the one point I wanted to make with Jerome Johnson, by the way, is my favorite stat about him. His second biggest offer when he committed to Indiana, after Indiana, was Alcorn State in the FCS. So unlike James Head, Jerome Johnson wasn't as highly recruited. Now he's ready to make a huge impact. But coming back to McFadden, the leadership part of the game is going to be huge. I mean, Marcelino Ball, we haven't talked about it yet in this episode, but Ball is out for the season with an injury, and Ball was supposed to step up and at least share some of the leadership responsibility this year, especially considering the Reese Senior Bowl had him on his watch list. But there's no Marcelino this season, so Micah McFadden absolutely will be taking on a huge leadership role. Kane Womack said as much in his press conference comments over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, tackle cleanly, play consistently, and if he can do that, it doesn't take a PhD in football to know that if you have great interior linebacker play, everything else improves just a little bit, if not even a lot. So McFadden. Well, and on the other hand, you can ask the Bears. I mean, the Bears have always had strong middle linebacker play. It's the one position the Bears have had. It's not been the quarterback. The middle linebacker is the one position the Bears have emphasized, and it's led to good defense over the course of time. And you can see the trends with Indiana. When T. Gray Scales was in there, Indiana was solid defensively. Then the next linebacker I wanted to mention was Cam Jones, and this guy, he's not the best player on this defense, but he's not the best player on this defense. But if you ask me, Cam Jones is the guy I think who can elevate IU to the next level or bring them down to the same level they were at last year, or even regress. Because Cam Jones is a playmaking hybrid linebacker who can run all over the field and wreak havoc, which is exactly what you need when you're facing 4 top 10 teams on your schedule, or top 20 teams on your schedule like IU is. Last season, Jones had a couple sacks. He had a pick 6 against Rutgers. He also didn't have as much responsibility on his plate. He's going to have that this season with Raekwon Jones graduating, with Marcelino Ball not in the picture this year. Matt, talk to us about Cam Jones, the junior outside linebacker.
Yeah, Cam Jones, again, junior outside linebacker, like Nithin just said, is a disruptor on defense. Now, that comes at a price with Cam because Cam missed a couple tackles last year, or a lot of them. So when I look at Cam, and you're going to look at improvement on the defense, you want to look at maybe improving tackling from Cam. But 2 sacks, a pick 6, not much you can ask for more from a disruptor on a season, especially coming from a program like IU. I look at him to equal those marks. I hope he gets another 2 sacks and maybe a pick 6 or 2. He's a super athlete again. I mean, who isn't in Division I football, but Cam genuinely is a freak athlete, and I look forward to seeing him hopefully get a pick 6 in the Penn State game. So,
yeah, and I misspoke earlier. It was the pick 6 in the UConn game last year, not the Rutgers one, but he still took one back to the house. He's a 6'3", 230-pound linebacker from Memphis, Tennessee. He was the 2018 Defensive Newcomer of the Year for IU, and then took a step ahead last season, 2019, and like I said, he's going to be huge for this defense once we get into 2020. The secondary for Indiana is going to be a huge part of this defense. All 4 starters, really 5 starters. Indiana plays kind of a 4-2-5 format defensively with Kane Womack calling the shots. Reese Taylor is going to be an important defensive back. Brian Fitzgerald's going to be impactful from the Husky position. Devon Matthews is going to step up as a starting senior safety this year. I don't think he's a senior, actually, a starting safety this year. But the guy we've got to start this conversation with is Tywone Mullen, true sophomore corner. Matt, take it away.
Look, when we're talking about Tywone Mullen, we are talking about a different level of talent that IU has not seen in the secondary in a very, very long time. Tywone Mullen is an NFL caliber, or potential NFL caliber corner. His brother's already making waves in the NFL with the Raiders. He's got the bloodline. Look, he's a sophomore. He didn't get an interception last year, which I think is incredible. But the completion percentage when thrown to Tywone is, well, not good for other teams, but great for us. Tywone was targeted multiple times last year. He's really good at breaking up passes, making sure the ball doesn't get to the receiver, playing without fouling, playing without getting a pass interference call. You can show that you can see that the talent is there. The fact that the teams were afraid to throw on him is like obvious factor, an obvious indicator of just how talented and how much respect other teams have for Tywone's talent. Tywone going into this year is going to have a little bit more responsibility as a sophomore. I assume that he will not end his IU career on 0 picks. I would hope that he gets a couple, and that's what I meant by maybe Micah McFadden doesn't get 2 interceptions this year, and somebody like Tywone Mullen might get 1 or 2 this year. And it'll be fun to see him, show off his athleticism in a return as well for a pick. It's something that we haven't seen yet, but he is a super athlete, as we all know. I'm just super excited to see Tywone grow and improve in this defense.
Well, it's impossible to be a starting corner in the Big Ten in your freshman year. And he made it look easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't work that way. And then you go, how is he not more recruited? Especially like you said, when his brother, who went to Clemson.
He was a 5-star recruit, went to Clemson, by the way.
I mean, how do you not make a bigger splash? By the way, Trayvon Mullen in the NFL is rated by Pro Football Focus to be something like the top 5 or 10 corners in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
As the Raiders, well, they just upset Kansas City last weekend. Tywone, I mean, just ready for this nominee listing. He's on the 2020 Chuck Bednarik Award watch list, given to the nation's best defensive player, not just the best defensive back. He was the honorable mention All Big Ten last season, first team freshman All-American according to The Athletic and 24/7 Sports. PFF had him as a second team All-Freshman nationally last year, and he was Indiana's Defensive Newcomer of the Year in 2019. So Mullen, 5'10" corner. I mean, the size is probably what scared some coaches away, but as you can tell, if you're technically sound and if you've got those playmaking genes, it doesn't matter. If you don't know who Tywone Mullen is, he is the most important player on this defense. He is the most impactful player on this defense. And even if he's not doing it while covering receivers, he's punching the ball out. He's scooping up the football when it's loose on the ground. He had a couple of those last year. And I want to see him carry the football once or twice, returning a pick. And if he doesn't get it returning a pick, I wonder if we see him maybe in one or two trick play situations offensively.
True.
Just speculating, because the athleticism and sort of the football wherewithal is there with Taiwan. The last defensive back I wanted to specifically mention as sort of a core 6 defensive player on this IU roster is Jamar Johnson, a junior safety. He really burst onto the scene last year. We're talking about guys like Cam Jones making a big impact, hopefully this season. Well, Jamar Johnson made that leap in 2019. He had 3 sacks, 2 picks, and they both came in great opportunities. He had a pick in the bucket game, and then he had a pick 6 in the bowl game against Tennessee. Yeah. Not too shabby. Matt, what do we need to know about Jamar Johnson?
Again, like most of his defense, he's an upperclassman, but he's a younger upperclassman. He's a junior. 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, you just said, pick 6 against Tennessee in the bowl game. That's a good resume to have as a sophomore. And going into your junior year, you're expecting him to step up, and you'd be like, oh, usually he'd be the star of the defense, especially after that stat line. But then you look at Taiwan Mullen, which makes like having Jamar Johnson, like our corner is going to be so good. And I can't stress this enough. I think the defensive line is going to get gifts because they're going to get coverage sacks. The quarterback's going to drop back to throw the ball, and a lot like times like in the NFL, they're going to sit back there for 3 or 4 seconds. All of a sudden, they go, "Oh crap! No one's open." These cornerbacks, these safeties, these defensive backs, they're so good. And all of a sudden, you got 4 defensive linemen looking at you like, "Ha ha! My teammates got you."
And this is where either the sacks are going to have to skyrocket or the picks are going to have to spike.
Yes,
one or the other.
Yeah,
one or the other, because last year the numbers just weren't there for Indiana. They were below 60th in the nation as far as sacks. Like I said, they had only 7 picks all last year. That was 100th in college football. So one or the other's got to happen, assuming all these guys stay healthy, because this secondary is the strength of this defense. And even without Raheem Lane,
the strength of the team. They might even be the best group in the team.
I agree. To me, it comes down to either that or the wide receivers.
Yeah.
And you could probably debate that for another hour. But as far as I'm concerned, this secondary is going to be huge. There is no Raheem Lane, who's banged up a little bit. Hopefully he'll make a return by the time the season ends. But this secondary is really good. Jamar Johnson, 6'1", 197, but another just insufficiently recruited player from the state of Florida. That's exactly where Tom Allen has made a huge mark as far as recruiting is concerned with this program. As far as what we're going to next, who won the week in IU sports? And there was an award handed out earlier this week where Lawrence Frank, who's an executive on the Clippers, won NBA Executive of the Year. And a lot of folks are upset that Frank won that award, but here's the deal: he's a former IU basketball manager, and look, the Clippers went out and had a really good season, even though they fell short in the playoffs. They don't count the playoffs with a lot of these awards, but to get guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to come play for the second franchise in Los Angeles, Lawrence Frank won that. So the former IU basketball manager, he won the week. Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't want to add anything about NBA basketball right now. I'm a little sad about it. But no, I mean, look, it's really cool to like the IU basketball family, how people end up everywhere. You got Mike Woodson, who's just been in the NBA forever. You've got Louis Frank, who's in Los Angeles with the Clippers. There's people pop up everywhere like, oh, former IU basketball manager. Like, huh? When was he a basketball manager? But I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Frank got his degree from IU in education. So that's how he started. And now he's moved on to running basketball operations with the LA Clippers. Matt, there are a few other interesting defensive players I wanted to mention. The one guy on my list is Husky Brian Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's going to take over for Marcelino Ball in that sort of versatile, do-everything Husky role. You're going to see him at times line up next to the defensive line and rush the passer. You're going to see him at times cover the tight end like a linebacker. In other plays, you're going to see him just line up across the slot receiver and cover him 30 yards down the field. So Fitzgerald has the physical traits to step in for Marcelino Ball. I'm excited to see him play. I mean, he was a highly recruited player coming out of high school, and this is somebody who, even though he's getting kind of thrust into a role this year, I think the junior Husky player, the junior Husky will make a pretty big impact. Is there anyone else on the defense that we haven't talked about yet that you want to throw out there for our listeners to know?
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about defensive backs, so I might as well throw out Reese Taylor as a name. Again, another junior. Like, just take this podcast. We're talking about defense. Just assume everybody on the team is a junior, and you're good, because legitimately this defense is just a junior defense. They've been playing together. They've been in the program together for 3, maybe even 4 years. They're redshirt junior. Reese Taylor, again, I feel like just got here. Remember him playing some snaps on the offensive end. He was recruited as a quarterback, not a cornerback, a quarterback. They've turned him into a cornerback. He brings really good depth on that side of the ball. Again, we'll probably be seeing him in some trick plays as well on the offensive end like we did last year and the year before that. He's just, again, another one of those athletes that can just play multiple positions, and we'll be seeing him in kickoff returns, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, Reese is going to be everywhere, so look out for Reese Taylor.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, what's exciting about Reese Taylor is you're talking about a former Mr. Football. I mean, Bryant Fitzgerald is also from the state of Indiana, Avon High School. It's great to see these Indiana kids step up for the Hoosiers. Taylor, I'm waiting for him to make a big play. I mean, we haven't seen him really sort of make a headline-grabbing, Twitter-breaking, pick six or even a special teams.
It's coming, though.
It's coming. It's coming this year. Mark my words. That's my. I don't think it's a very bold prediction, but Reese Taylor is going to have a play this year, whether it's a pick six or a big sack or tackle for loss at the end of a game. One play at least where we go, man, if it weren't for that, Indiana would have lost. So I'm looking forward to seeing Reese Taylor step up in that facet of the game as we head down, like I said, a week and a half to go until the season starts. Special teams, Matt, I mean, not too much to go into there. Hayden Whitehead's a senior punter. He's back for Indiana, hitting missiles on 4th down when called upon. Charlie Campbell, new kicker this year, redshirt sophomore. He did get some playing time last year in the game against Eastern Illinois. He made a field goal in some really tough conditions against Purdue to help take that game into overtime. Indiana, it's weird. It's weird to say the Hoosiers are solid on special teams, but that's where we are, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, Hayden Whitehead's from Australia, right? He's from the Pro Football Kick Australia program. Again, if you've been watching any of the restart of college football, you've probably heard that said about 12 times. Because Miami's punter who's really good is from that program, and a bunch of other punters all around the country are from Australia from that program. Hayden Whitehead's a good punter and solid punter, so nothing we have to worry about there. And then Charlie Campbell's a former Army All-American kicker. He was I believe the number 3 kicker in his class coming out of high school.
Yeah,
he's a good kicker. He came into what was terrible conditions against Purdue and really like high pressure situation and just kicked a field goal right down the middle. I remember during that game. I truly believe that the sky's the limit for Charlie Campbell. I assume, like a lot of former IU football kickers, he will be getting looked at by the NFL eventually by the time he leaves college. Charlie is that good. So special teams in really good hands.
Yeah, Logan Justice was the primary kicker for IU last year, but when he was struggling against the Boilermakers, Campbell came in and made that kick. I think it was like 40 yards in West Lafayette with the swirling wind and rain.
Wind, cold rain.
That was
needed the field goal to put in. There's a lot to put on a plate of a freshman there.
Oh, for sure. And that was the worst weather game I think I've ever attended in person because wow. You can imagine end of November in West Lafayette. It was just 30, probably 38, 40 degrees and just absolute nightmare conditions. But hey, Hoosiers won that game. I think that's all that matters. Matt, your social media shout out. What do you got for us tonight?
Social media shout out. This one's fairly easy. That's John Rothstein came out with his usual top 45 update. Another week, I'm confused at how they just come up with these numbers. But anyways, top 45 from John Rothstein. IU is at 29th. Again, approaching the top 25. I assume we'll be getting a lot of votes preseason-wise for the AP poll, if not being in the top 25 itself. John Rothstein's a little bit bullish on us, putting us at 29th compared to, I know Jeff Goodman had us at like 23 or 22 earlier this year. Again, all in the same neighborhood. Up to IU to prove them wrong and be in the top 15 this year. But yeah, so shout out to Indiana HQ on Twitter and on Facebook and the website. So go visit us, please, and go read our articles. There's a lot of really good articles coming out on there, especially with football starting to get ever so closer.
Yeah, we're planning on having full-scale wall-to-wall coverage of this football season when it kicks off on October 24th, and the basketball season, which is scheduled to start November 25th. By the way, it's bearish when you're talking about somebody who's pessimistic. So Rothstein, when he has IU at 20, bearish is what
bullish is.
Bullish is when you're optimistic.
Oh, darn! No.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean,
I'm
look,
supposed to be an English teacher.
if Wall Street is listening to us, I wouldn't want to upset them. But getting back to the actual article, I think I don't know what he drank, to be perfectly honest with you. I think having Indiana that low is a little surprising because, just to be honest, like there's been no other major news or whatever with this team in the last few weeks, if not maybe month and a half yet. For some reason, Indiana's below teams like Memphis and Ohio State and Florida that are losing a lot. I think we're going to look back on this article and let's say 29 is way too low for this team. As we head into the next season of college basketball here at Indiana, which began with a media day yesterday. Even though games won't start for another 6 weeks and there's no schedule, we're just going to have a media day. We're going to start the first day of practice earlier today, which is Wednesday when we're recording this. The first day of practice off and running for the Hoosiers. There was a cool video posted on the Indiana men's basketball account. Media day had some interesting comments. Usually things are very sort of vanilla, nothing really earth-shattering. But as far as I'm concerned, Matt, both Archie Miller and the players had some interesting comments. Let's start with Archie's quotes from the start of media day yesterday. First and foremost, the Crossroads Classic is still on. They're planning to play Butler in Indianapolis. That was after some news we got last week where the Gavitt games fell through, so Indiana won't be playing a Big East opponent. Jerome Hunter, according to Archie Miller, is trending well. He's back to being the old Jerome. He's going to play a big role. Matt, that has to be music to your ears.
I've been on the Jerome hype train since he started playing last year. Actually, since he was recruited. I've been on the Jerome hype train. Still am. Still honking that horn at the front of the train. Look, old Jerome is music to my ears. Again, in high school, he was a 3-level scorer. Last year he showed promise, especially towards the end of the year as a 3-point shooter. But old Jerome could post up too, and had a nasty mid-range game, and could put the ball on the floor. I like old Jerome, and I'm really excited to see old Jerome in this offense. And it'll open up the floor a lot more if Jerome can be not a primary scorer, but like a secondary scorer in this offense to trace. And that's what the team needs.
And I just can't help but get excited about what Hunter. I can't help but get excited about Hunter either. You talk about someone who's going to play a bigger role with Justin Smith and Demezy Anderson out of the picture. He's going to get playing time, no matter how.
Yeah.
He could be walking on one leg with his shoulder in a sling, but he's gonna get playing time. I mean, it doesn't matter. He's too important to this team. and it's not like you have to have seen production in his freshman and sophomore seasons to understand that. He's going to make a big difference for IU this upcoming year. And I can't wait to see what's in store for him, because we talked about this a couple years ago. He was in the same recruiting class as Romeo Langford and Rob Finney, and he was in between those two guys. Okay, you're talking about a top 50, top 60 type high school recruit. He had his injury problems, and now I can't wait to see what he's going to do as he enters this upcoming season. Let's get into some player comments. Trace Jackson Davis of the team is coming together. He's excited to see him and Race Thompson play at the 4 and 5 together in that front court. He said he's working with his right hand dribble a little bit more. I know that's something all IU fans are excited to see. He didn't say anything about a jump shot. Maybe he's keeping that a secret, right, Matt?
I hope he's keeping that a secret, especially for his NBA futures. I hope he keeps that a secret until he shows it off that he's shooting 40% from three. No. No, look, right-hand dribbles, great for Trace, especially on the interior. I think that'll benefit him greatly. And then you look at the leader of the team, who has to be Trace, saying the team is coming together. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that he's going to say the team isn't coming together, but it's good to hear good news. And then, look, him and Race at the 4 and the 5. Last year we talked about it. That was their best lineup, was them at the 4 and the 5. And if Joey's coming off the bench and giving that experience off the bench this year, we're looking at a really, really promising IU team. Race is really good on defense. Maybe even inject a little bit of three-point shooting into his game. Maybe even Trace did as well. And all of a sudden, we're looking at a team that can space the floor and attack at multiple levels. And that's exactly what you want from an IU offense.
Exactly. And that's going to be important. I want to spend a little bit more time on the thing with him and Race. I mean, to have that athleticism inside, I can already – I'm not going to make any statistical predictions, but that – combo, they're not going to give up too many rebounds. I don't care, I don't care who you're going up against now. The Big Ten is deep, and apparently John Rossi thinks Indiana's like the 10th best team in the Big Ten or something now. But Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson, they're going to be a huge problem inside no matter who they face. I want to get into some of the comments from a couple of freshmen. Christian Lander and Jordan Geronimo spoke. Anthony Leal did as well. Leal said he was excited just to wear the IU uniform, which is, I know, something a lot of Indiana fans want to hear from an in-state kid, a Bloomington kid. Jordan Geronimo said he's got a 40-inch vertical. Okay. All right.
Have you watched the kid play basketball? Like, I'm surprised it isn't higher. Yeah. Jordan Geronimo is an athletic freak. And there's multiple people make comments. I saw a whole slew of comments yesterday on Jordan Geronimo, how surprised they were, how he's going to be a big impact on the team. Again, this is a 4-star freshman, high 3-star, low 4-star freshman coming in, who played basketball, picked up basketball late. Is a late bloomer, as some call it. So maybe we have a diamond in a rough in Jordan Geronimo.
Hey, we've had a few of those in Indiana over the last, 8, 10, 12 years. So that would not surprise me in the least. Armand Franklin called Geronimo a freak athlete, if you want exact words from Media Day yesterday. Christian Lander is obviously the blue chip freshman that we all want to talk about. Christian said he feels like he's a fast learner. He's trying to understand the offense a little bit better. There's a report that you could definitely see Lander and Rob Finney share the floor at times. Any of these freshman comments stand out to you all that much, especially the stuff that Lander said?
I like the fast learner part. Like, that just shows me the intelligence. And Lander, again, is a year younger than he should be. He skipped a year of high school. Yeah, adorable. I have admiration. Don't make fun of me, Coach. Coach is making fun of me in the chat. Anyways, no. Look, back to Lander. I really like what I'm hearing from Lander. Lander is, again, like you said, blue chip recruit. We're talking about a 5-star player here. Even when he reclassified, he's still a 5-star player. Looking at a point guard that come on the floor and play off ball. And look, when you're looking at doing a little bit of a comparison, you looked at the Lakers were playing this in the NBA Finals this past week, right? And how Rajon Rondo was able to just do what Rajon Rondo does best and manipulate the game by using his head and using his brain, using his basketball IQ. Lander could come in and use what is a high-level basketball IQ that he has at a young age, and he doesn't have to. He's not going to be the physically most imposing player on the floor. He might not even be the most athletic player on the floor in his own team, but his ability for him to think the game and use his head during the game is going to be a key during this season and something that's going to be an asset for this program.
I really like Rondo as the comparison for Lander. I'm not saying they're a carbon copy of each other, but just a left-handed Rondo just sort of driving the floor, or I guess almost like driving the car, controlling the floor for Indiana. May not be as early as his freshman season, but the distribution, the defense, I like that comparison a lot.
If I'm not mistaken, Rondo's from Louisville, right?
Yeah.
So it's even the same area.
Louisville, Evansville.
Yeah. So
there you go. I like that a lot. Yeah, something I haven't really thought about until you mentioned it there. A couple other veterans took the podium yesterday. Al Durham, the sole senior, said he's a huge fan of Kenya Hunter so far, the new assistant coach that took over recently here at Indiana. He feels like Hunter's been a very hands-on assistant so far. Also, Durham said he's going to miss the fans at Assembly Hall. The fans aren't able to come because we know how big of a home court advantage that is in Bloomington. Rob Finney also spoke. Finney said he's self-aware. He knows that Indiana plays better when he's more aggressive. So, hey, I guess the first step to improvement is identifying what you can do better. So Finney, tip of the cap to you, man. You understand it like all Indiana fans understand it. When you put your head down and when you play at the fifth gear, Indiana just is a much better basketball team.
That's right. It seems like Rob has been listening to a couple of the IU basketball podcasts in recent times, has become self-aware. Nice. No, I mean, again, I can't stress it enough. When Rob is in attack mode, this team is much better. I assume as a junior, we'll be seeing him in attack mode a lot more. And then Al Durham, senior leader, 3-4 year starter now. Kenya Hunter is good news. Like to hear, if you get negative comments about your assistant coach, you're crying. But no, I'm serious. Like having a new head coach and telling you to put his mark on the program, that's good to hear. And then he'll be, putting even more of a mark on the program with practice starting today. And then on Al's last comment, we're gonna miss them. Like I want to go to Assembly Hall right now.
I know.
Watching practice, I'm sure I am not the only person in this chat, in this podcast, in this basketball IU fandom that would want to go watch practice of this team. If we could be there, we would.
Yeah.
And when it's safe to do so, we will show up in droves.
Exactly. And I mean, Finney may not be listening just to IU podcast, but he's probably listening to his coaching staff too. I mean, Archie's
scouts and everything.
Archie's scout. Yeah, good call on the scouts too. I mean, Archie's been loud about this. There's not been too much criticism Archie's made of his players in the public, and this isn't even a criticism of Finney, but there was a game last year against Ohio State in Bloomington where Indiana won. Finney hit a couple threes. He is an all-around incredible performance from him, and Archie made it clear like that's the Rob Finney Indiana needs to succeed. Yet he didn't really take a big step up from his freshman to his sophomore season. So with Christian Lander in tow, with Anthony Leal also in the backcourt, with Al Durham maybe getting a little bit more ball handling on his repertoire as well, you better believe Finney might have a little bit more competition to motivate him as he heads into his junior year. Yeah, Coach makes a good point in the chat. Hopefully everyone reaches their potential. A few good breaks never hurts, to say the least. I don't have to go back to the Illinois game last year where a few good breaks would have made a big difference, but we won't get into that too much. Matt, closing thoughts in general as we wind up here on episode 163. Anything stand out as far as the defense on the football team, college football and coronavirus, the NBA finals, IU basketball? Anything on your mind here as we wrap up?
Oh, I mean, you want me to wrap up or you want me to talk for another hour? Because those subjects I could go on forever.
No, wrap up, please.
All right. I'll wrap up with what Coach just said. And we talked about the defense ad nauseum earlier. You want to go back and listen to that?
Yeah.
But as far as the basketball team goes, it's in a good place. I think hopefully Archie has finally found the right mixture of assistants and personnel and players that he can put together and get a team that all improves as one. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen little improvements here by Jawan. It's got really good, but the rest of the team is lagging behind him. And then last year, Trace is really good and had some really good development during the season. But again, parts of the team, like Rob Finney, lagged behind him. It didn't improve as much as we had hoped. So hopefully this year, we're looking at a team that all develops together, all gets better together as a unit. And we start seeing not only just improvement on the floor, but improvement just as a whole in the program.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point with the basketball team. As far as football is concerned, yeah, like you said, defense we talked about quite a bit earlier. Just coronavirus keeps throwing curveballs, right? I mean, there's an SEC game canceled this weekend between I think it was Missouri and Vanderbilt. So much happening on a week-to-week basis. All I can say is hopefully we can get the 8+1 games on the schedule in and completed. It's going to be a wild ride, and it all starts with Penn State coming to town. I mean, what a matchup that's going to be in week 1. I'm curious to see what the line is in that game. We'll probably have it for you next week before we as we preview the Indiana Penn State matchup before the teams kick off a week and a half from now. But that about wraps it up for our 163rd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You guys are beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like this one, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any in the future, or go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans like yourselves. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace and love. Stay safe, everyone.